Hello, this is Michael Sankner, here to talk to you about Taoism, the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way and its power. And here we have some nice classical music, the kind of music that was popular, I guess, in the 6th century, that this writing comes from. And this writing is the Tao Te Ching. It looks like this now. This is the original Chinese text from the Wengu site. And I'd like to go through the whole thing. It's beautiful. It's too bad that we can't make this beautiful and have pictures like that. I don't know if I can do both. But I'd like to talk about the text, actually. The text and in the philosophy of nowadays, really. There are 81 chapters, 9 times 9, 3 times 3 times 3. And this book has been around 2,600 years, since the time of Socrates, Lao Tzu, or whoever wrote this book, maybe a group of people, or maybe a tradition of people, or somebody named Lao Tzu, would have been contemporary of Socrates, more or less, 500 BC, 600 BC, around then. And there have been a lot of translations done. So the fact that I'm translating is nothing special. Actually, it's been done hundreds of times in different languages. Here's a French one, here's a German one. And that in itself is nothing special. But anyway, I'd like to bring the little bit that I've learned about Taoism as a meditative practice, and also the little bit I've learned about Buddhism and some other things, and the Chinese language, to talk about Taoism from this book, and to go through all these 81 things, these 81, I say things, it's called a chapter, but it's more like a page. So let's give this a try. Tao Te Ching. So the first Tao, Tao, De, and then Ching. You see my writing, like, I'm not much of a scholar, really. Dao De Jing. Okay, whoops, I should go like that. There we go. Usually, so here, as you can see, translated as the way and its power, and it's quite interesting. I like to just start with the word Jing. Dao pretty clearly, means way, and I'll talk more about that next time. But right now, I just want to talk about this word De. The pinyin, the romanization is like that, De. And usually in the dictionaries, like for example here in the Plico dictionary, oh, I lost my Plico. Where's my Plico? Plico. The word De, I have it pulled up here. De, and you see that it often gets translated as virtue, as in these sentences like Da De, great virtue, Bu Dao De, immoral, so morality or virtue. But it seems to me that the word virtue nowadays has a really sort of, I'll say, sucky, like kind of wimpy or sucky or milquetoast, kind of weak sort of feeling, like it's not edgy, it's not cool to be virtuous, right? And I think that's, the demoralization of society over, a century or more. Basically, socialism, communism the demoralization of society, so that everything is about struggle, and we don't have the sense of virtue as being something that's really good anymore, and that's something that's really strong. And yet when you look at the word virtue, the etymology of the word virtue, the root is vir, which is Latin for man, as in the word virile, virgin, and they're actually werewolf. Vir is cognate with German wer, because in classical Latin that would have pronounced weird. So werewolf is a man wolf. So the word vir meant man, as in a he-man, as in a strong man. And in those days, virtue, like when you think of before, the 20th century anyway, a lot of virtue had to do with courage, actually, right? And standing up for the right thing. And so I think it's virtue in that sense of the word virtue. And that is why I would argue that you see how they've translated. They haven't used the word virtue in the title in this translation, the way and its power. So here, de is being translated as power, not as kindness, goodness, morality, which are sort of like sucky nowadays. They suck, right? They're not cool. They're not like gangsta, right? So virtue, but power. And there are other commentators talking about Dao De, meaning that you get power from being in the way, right? Being in the eternal way, in the path. When you're on the path, you have power, this natural power, and that's more. I agree. That's more what De is really about. Just to start with the title, how would we translate the title? I think I would agree with this. The book. So Ching is definitely a book, and it's when you look at the etymology. I'm using the for this mouse over. I'm using the Zhongwen app in Chrome, which is great because you mouse over any Chinese character and you get instant translation. But translations always are approximations, right? That's the whole point. You don't have it's not exactly the same language to language, and any interpretation actually, I would even say, has a political side to it, right? So the fact that there's none of these translations talking about power, that seems like a political thing, given the current affairs, where moral relativism has come in. And I would like to, I think I have an agenda really of talking about traditional conservative Chinese values, which are universal conservative values, actually. And I think we think of Taoism as, the watercourse way and anything goes. But actually, I think that's a bit of a myth, sort of a bit of a New Age thinking kind of myth about what Taoism really is. Okay, so we'll get to that as we go. It's certainly a mystical thing, though. However, I don't want to get into all that yet right now. We're going to stick with what does the title mean. So Ching is definitely a classic, and the radical here on the right, this bit here, this is the radical, gives them meaning, and that's the silk radical, and so they would sew the books together. And that's where that word comes from. And the word sutra, the sutras, like the Buddhist sutras, that's the same etymology as the word suture, as in to sew. Those are all related etymologically. So they're the same word for a book. And in those days, it had to be a special, only special things were made into books and sewn together by hand. So the Jing, there's all the different Jings. There's the Tao Te Ching, there's the I Ching, the Book of Changes. So the book, a classic book, a sacred book. And then Tao definitely is basically way. And it also means to say, to speak. And that's right here in this first line. It already gets that pun of, there's a pun there in the first line about the way. So it's talking about the way as in the way, the human way, the human way of moving forward in this crazy world that we live in. What's a good way? What's a good path as we find our, as we sort our way through the yin and the yang, the shadows and the light? How do we move forward? And finding power, finding a way, not only a path, but also a fashion or a manner of walking, like of comporting ourselves that has power. That's what this book really is about, I would say. So I would agree with this, The Way and Its Power, the book of The Way and Its Power. Thanks. And we'll see you in the next video. We'll start into chapter 1, translating this word for word. It's wonderful. You'll love it. Thank you very much.